The story of the Desert Warriors crushing a mighty kingdom has survived through time because it captures something people rarely see today. Pure conviction meeting overwhelming odds. It begins far from grand palaces and marching legions. It starts with a small band of fighters shaped by the desert. Men who understood hunger, heat, and struggle better than any trained army. The kingdom they faced had every advantage: numbers, armor, wealth, and a reputation so fierce that most smaller tribes surrendered at the mere mention of its name. But reputation becomes meaningless when a force rises that fights for something deeper than land or power. These warriors didn't march with polished armor or shining swords. Their power came from discipline carved by hardship. The desert had been their teacher, the dunes their battlefield long before they ever saw the kingdom's flag. They fought not for conquest, but for survival, honor, and the belief that destiny favors the brave. The enemy, on the other hand, trusted too deeply in its strength. They had grown comfortable behind fortress walls and believed fear alone would weaken their opponents. But the desert is a place that strips away illusions, and these warriors carried that clarity into battle. When the two forces finally met, the difference was visible before a single weapon was raised. The kingdom's soldiers were decorated and confident, yet heavy and slow in the sun. The desert fighters were lean, sharp-eyed, and moved as if the land itself guided them. They didn't see themselves as weaker. They saw themselves as chosen by the very environment that had tried to break them and failed. The battle began with speed, not strength. The warriors struck the kingdom's weak spots, breaking formation again and again. They used the terrain, the wind, the light, tiny advantages that became devastating when combined with discipline and courage. The kingdom's commanders expected a traditional war, ranks clashing, shields locking, brute force deciding victory. But what they faced was strategy born from necessity. The desert warriors vanished and reappeared like shadows, striking precisely, never wasting energy. Every movement was calculated. Every charge served a purpose. Their leader stood at the center of it all, not shouting orders, but guiding with a calm confidence that spread through the ranks. Under him, fear dissolved, replaced by a fire that ordinary training could never produce. Slowly, the mighty kingdom began to crack. First it was frustration, then confusion, then panic. The soldiers who once seemed unstoppable now struggled to hold their ground. Loyalties built on salary and status broke quickly when survival became uncertain. In contrast, the desert warriors grew stronger with every passing moment. They weren't fighting to avoid defeat. They were fighting to prove who they truly were. Once the kingdom's front line collapsed, the rest followed like a structure losing its foundation. What had started as a clash turned into a symbol of how heart can outweigh numbers and how grit can outshine power. The kingdom's defeat wasn't just military, it was moral. They had grown too sure of themselves, forgetting that strength without hunger becomes weakness. Meanwhile, the warriors' victory was a reminder that people forged in adversity carry a resilience that privileged armies can't match. As the dust settled, the battlefield told a story. Banners torn, shields scattered, and a silence that only comes when something historic has happened. The warriors didn't celebrate with loud victory cries. They simply stood in the wind, breathing deeply, knowing they had rewritten a chapter of history that no one expected them to touch. What makes this story powerful is not just the triumph, but what it reveals about human nature. People often assume greatness belongs to those with the most resources. But battles, literal or metaphorical, are rarely won by the obvious favorite. They are won by those who refuse to accept limits. The desert warriors carried no illusions about the danger ahead, yet they moved forward anyway. Their courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision that something greater than fear was worth fighting for. Today, their victory lives on as a reminder that overwhelming odds don't define destiny. Every generation finds its own version of this battle, moments where strength seems outmatched, where challenges feel too large, where defeat looks certain. But this story teaches that the outcome belongs to those who stay sharp, stay humble, and stay hungry. It shows that even a mighty kingdom can fall when met by people who are committed, united, and driven by purpose. In the end, the warriors didn't just crush a kingdom. They shattered the belief that power comes from size. They proved that real power comes from heart, clarity, resilience, and unbreakable will. Their story continues to inspire because it speaks to anyone who has ever felt outnumbered yet refused to back down. It speaks to anyone who has ever faced giants and still chosen to fight. It reminds the world that true strength is not built in comfort, but in the quiet, demanding struggle against the elements, against doubt, and against limitations.